Alright, welcome back. Now, a couple videos ago, I was talking about the ways of earning ISK in the game. Pretty much that includes piracy, mining, transportation, and trading. Now, one of the other ways that you can use to earn money in the game is via missions. Now, currently in the game, we have three tiers of missions. You have the basic tier, you have the advanced missions, and of course the expert tier. And all of these tiers do vary a lot. The first tier, the basic tier, includes ships from tier 1 to tier 4, and they're usually very easy. You don't have to worry about losing your ship in those missions, and they can be done even with a tier 2 and tier 3 ship very easily. Now, the advanced missions that you will see here in this video are pretty much a little bit more difficult, and for these missions, you need to have at least a decently built tier 4 ship. In this case, I will use my Talwar trainer, a very robust and very reliable ship for these types of missions and pretty much for this type of combat. And here you can see my weapons and pretty much my slots. I did upgrade the ship mostly to Mark 5 equipment. This is also counting as a budget build or a budget fit, and so far it did prove itself to be very efficient and very effective. And as well, you can also do these missions with tier 3 or Mark 3 items and modules. It will work just the same, just with a little difference in the DPS. But overall, all the mechanics and everything else about this will be the same. Now, you have several types of these advanced missions in terms of difficulty. You have those that are going to be a little bit more difficult, pretty much requiring you to fly a tier 6 or a tier 7 ship. But in my case, I will be covering the first tier of these anomalies, tier 5s and tier 5 missions, and sometimes even tier 6. I'll be doing them with a tier 4 ship. Pretty much I'll be risking a little bit, but it will be worth it since the rewards are actually pretty nice this time around. And the rewards are actually a lot better than in the basic missions. The basic missions sometimes can be very long. Sometimes these basic missions can be very boring, and the basic missions sometimes do consume a lot of time since they would require you to warp over 20 jumps for 8000 ISK, which is pretty low compared to the effort to actually get there. While these other missions, the advanced ones, the tier that I'm currently doing, is actually a lot better in the terms of reward. You can actually get around 250 to 500,000 ISK without much of a problem. And comparing that to the anomalies, this is actually a faster way for low tier pilots to earn ISK in the game. And I did actually do the calculations, and I did actually come to the conclusion that doing these missions is actually twice to 3 times more efficient than doing the tier 3 and tier 4 anomalies with a tier 3 or tier 4 ship. Since these anomalies give you on an average around 120,000 ISK per large anomaly, while these missions can give you up to 500,000 ISK per mission, and that is a very nice difference. And if you want to earn ISK very fast, I advise that you go for tier 5 to unlock the advanced missions, to grab a decent powerful tier 4 ship, and of course you need to have a decent build on that ship as well. And pretty much you can do the first tier of these advanced missions just fine without much of a problem. And well, in this case, I'll be showing you around these Minmatar missions and how I complete them with this ship. Now, my skills currently are decent. Of course, they can always be better, to be honest. But the current skills that I have are pretty much around what alpha clones will have, even though I have a omega clone currently. And the current performance that you see from this ship will be the same on a alpha clone, since my skills pretty much equal the alpha clone currently in this moment. So this time around, like I said, I will be doing the Minmatar missions, and the Minmatar ships so far I did see that they are easier compared to the other ships to fight because of their weapons. They use projectile weapons, either artillery or autocannons, and your main threat in these missions for this race will be the stabbers. they can be very tricky and they can track your ship sometimes very efficiently. And I do have a Mark III macro drive on a Talwar. You have to keep in mind that you have to take advantage of your ship's bonuses. This ship has a decent bonus on the signature radius reduction upon increased skill level with the micro drive, and this pretty much means this ship is excellent to be used with a micro drive, since you will have the speed that the micro drives do give, and of course your signature radius won't be increased that much, which is very important for PvP, PvE, and pretty much for any type of combat in the game. And I do make my primary target mostly to be the frigate, then I take out the destroyer, and then I jump on the cruisers. But in some instances, when the cruisers are actually the closest to me, I actually focus on the cruiser first, then on the other targets. The Geist Stabbers that you can see here, they can be very nasty. They also have micro drives equipped, and they can be very fast. In some cases, they can be faster than your ship. So if you're doing these missions, make sure that you have either a very tanky ship or that you have a very fast ship that has decent DPS. Or else you might have problems with catching up with these ships, and of course, in some cases, they can warp disrupt you, and that can lead to some lost ships. So you have to be very careful around those, since I do remember that in the last beta that they did warp scramble you, and it was a tough battle actually back in the last beta. But now, since I do keep distance from these ships, I think they don't have range with the disruptors, so I am pretty much safe. And again, the most efficient ships for these types of missions are ships that use missiles. Now, of course, I think this is mostly my personal preference, that I use missiles. But of course, you can use projectiles, you can use railguns, you can use even lasers. Pretty much use the ship and the weapon system that works the best for you. In my case, I am pretty skilled in this game with missiles, so I am using missiles. And pretty much I am sure that you can also be very effective with other weapons in the game, since the weapons were reworked and most of the weapons were really balanced, and they are actually very close now in power, and each of the weapons has their own advantage or disadvantage, which is very nice. Now, these missions also can be quite long, and in some cases, if you do the missions that can give you over 500,000 ISK, you can expect serious opponents in those missions, because those missions usually include up to 3, 4, 5, or even 6 cruisers, and you have to have a ship that can out-tank those ships, that can also outmaneuver them and out-DPS them. Or pretty much you can invite other players in your fleet, and you can do these missions in a fleet, which is also a very nice idea, and it will bring a lot of team play, which this game is revolving around. And so far, I haven't participated in any fleet till this moment. I've been very focused on farming, and I do plan to try out a fleet soon with other players. I think that will be very interesting, especially a PvP fleet. Those were very fun in the last beta, since I was participating in the last beta in a fleet, and it was very successful. Interestingly enough, my ships in the last beta, in that fleet, my ships had the highest DPS, and usually I would have 40 or 50% of total damage done to any ship that we did fight, which was very interesting, and we'll see if I can achieve the same thing in the live version of the game. Well, these missions are progressing so far really good. Now I will show you a couple of situations where you will have to sometimes warp out. Now currently my capacitor isn't that stable. It can withstand 52 seconds with all modules active, which is in some cases good, but in a lot of cases really bad. Really bad because my shield booster will have to be active for a very long time if I do take constant damage from these cruisers. And very good because I can actually time my modules to conserve power, and in that way I can actually wait out the cooldown of the battery that I use, and then I can just turn on the battery, the capacitor battery, and just leave the shield booster active constantly, and that will make this ship kind of tanky against these ships and against these opponents, which worked so far really well. Of course, don't be afraid to warp out if you have to. Don't lose your ships in any missions. And if you see that your tank is getting if your tank is actually getting penetrated, then feel free to warp out and to pretty much regroup or change your fit, and of course return to continue the mission. I did warp out a couple times in the duration of this video, and you'll actually see my armor being damaged at some point in the video, so warping out is totally okay, and don't be afraid to warp out if you have to, since the mission's worth isn't the same as the ship's worth, and that means don't lose your ships in any type of content in the game, since if you fly a very expensive ship, then that might be a problem, since expensive ships tend to hurt more than the inexpensive ones, but even the inexpensive ones hurt if you lose them. And I'm talking from experience. I'm talking from my personal EVE Online experience. And losing ships is definitely something that you will have to avoid. And of course, in some cases, losing your ship can't be avoided. And at the same time, don't be afraid of losing your ship. So pretty much the old saying that all players in EVE already know, don't fly ships you can't afford to lose, is also applied for missions. So at the same time, try not to lose any ship, but at the same time, don't be afraid to lose any ships, because losing ships is in the end part of the game, and it will happen to most of us at some point in the game. So don't be afraid of that. It happens, and it is alright. And you should always fly ships that you can afford to lose, because those that you can afford to lose, you can also replace very easily. The frigates that do carry those items and those modules from time to time are the probers and what was its name? I kind of forgot the other frigate that you can find in these missions, and they should be your primary target, because they do carry Webifers and they do carry scramblers with them, or warp disruptors. I call a scrambler a warp disruptor, even though those two are different modules. I don't know why. My apologies for that. I guess it happens. So when I say scrambler, I usually mean disruptor, since currently in the game we don't have any scramblers. We have only disruptors, which is, I guess, one thing that I have to get used to still. Now here you can see my shield taking some damage, and I did play around with this ship for a very long time now, and of course that includes the 2 betas before. And I have to say, this ship can be tanky if you make it, if you fit it to be tanky. Now my personal biggest problem currently is the capacitor. As you can see, I run out of capacitor very quickly, even though I have the shield boosting skills on max, and almost on max, of course. I think I still do need to level up the advanced and expert skills for the shield boosters, but most of them is already completed. So I do conserve a lot of capacitor with those skills, because you actually get a 7% less capacitor usage by the shield booster per skill level by default from the skill, and that pretty much is applied to all shield boosters in the game. Now, of course, you have small shield boosters, medium and large, and of course in the future extra large for the capital ships. And I think all of these modules have their unique skills, which should be leveled up, since they do help out a lot in combat. And well, I did hold out. As you can see, I do time the modules, and I do time the shield boostings in fast successions, pretty much 7% per activation, and that's pretty much what I keep to make the capacitor alive, and of course to keep my shield alive. and of course to keep my own ship alive, because if I were not activating the shield booster, then they would penetrate my shield, and when they penetrate my shield, then I am toasted, because this ship's armor isn't that big. Of course, it has decent resistances, but it's still armor, and the Talwar is mostly a shield tank ship. So if they penetrate your armor, and if they penetrate your shield, then this ship is pretty much done for. And of course, I am not going to let that happen. So far, I efficiently did tank out, and I did efficiently survive up to 3 cruisers in this ship without the need of warping out. Of course, it all depends from the rats as well, since sometimes they have excellent tracking, and sometimes they do actually penetrate my shield very quickly, right on the warp pin, which in my personal experience was really weird. Now, these ships that I fight come equipped with 2 weapon systems. They use either autocannons and they use either artillery. And I did notice the artillery doing a lot more damage to me than autocannons. And I think the spawnings that's actually random. It's actually random if they spawn in with the autocannons or artillery. But if you're doing these missions, and if you see artillery fire on your ship, make sure to make that cruiser one of your primary targets, because that cruiser is going to do most damage on your ship. And these missions also can be done with a ship with a afterburner, because a afterburner won't have a signature radius penalty, and it will still be giving you a decent speed boost, and of course you are still going to be fast. But that requires other skills, and that also requires a different ship. And other ships, I did notice, aren't that efficient, at least in my experience, against these enemies. And of course, you should also stick to the ship types, and of course the ship counters that you have in the game. Well then, that was one of the moments where my tank was broken, and as you can see, they did penetrate my armor a little bit, and I did have to warp out. Well, upon returning, I pretty much continued where I left off. I did make a mistake there, and I did make the mistake of not making the right ship the primary target, and the ship that was doing the most damage to me did stay alive for the most time, and that one ship did make sure that my shield won't live long. And as you can see, my shield was broken, and I did have to warp out. Now, I could have stayed, since I did have the battery, but I did not want to risk, since this ship's armor isn't that good. So I just did not want to risk if they penetrate my shield twice or 3 times, because the armor will take damage, and I'll have to dock and to pretty much repair if the armor is damaged to a serious extent. Which, of course, thankfully, I have avoided successfully this time around. And of course, I did return, and I did take out the remaining enemy forces. And I have to say, that was one of the several warp outs that I did do. Several times I also did warp out, because I did see that they are going to break my tank, and then I warped out to regroup, to recover my health, and to recover my capacitor, not health. This is Eve. To recover my capacitor, and then I returned and pretty much continued where I left off. So as you can see, these missions, level 5, tier 5 missions, are totally able to be done with a tier 4 ship. I need to try this with a tier 4 ship, although I need to try this with a tier 3 ships, although the tier 3s are going to have lesser damage output, and they are going to have a lack of modules, and overall a lack of overall DPS, which I think will be interesting for me to try out, because those other ships will be equipped with a afterburner. And of course, I will be taking a look at the other faction missions that we have, and that includes Calderi, Galente, and Amar, tier 5 advanced missions, which will be very interesting to see how they compare with one another, and of course, if I'll be even able to do them with a Talwar. It will be interesting to see how that will work. Well, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed. I hope that this can help you in the game. And well, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.